Hi, I'm Cherie Lindberg, and welcome to Elevated Life Academy, where we share real stories of healing, hope, and transformation. Tune in to hear how everyday people are rising above and lighting the way for others. Welcome to another episode of Elevated Life Academy, and I am your host, Cherie Lindberg, and we have Dr. Judy with us, and I will have her introduce herself in just a second. We were just talking, and we're going to talk about the human curriculum. We're going to find out what that's all about and how Dr. Judy arrived to that. So, without further ado, Dr. Judy, can you tell us, your full name, where you're located, and what anything else relevant that you'd like to share with us?
Sure. I'll start off by saying thank you for having me here today. I'm excited to chat with you. I'm Dr. Judy Jaunzems-Fernuk, and I am currently located out of Treaty 6 territory. So that's Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. I teach at the University of Saskatchewan, located on Treaty 6. And I usually describe myself as an educator, a researcher, a mental health practitioner, and a parent. Those are typically the four main hats that I wear. And I spend most of my life teaching at the University of Saskatchewan and the College of Education, as well as the College of Law. So I have a bridged contract between the two colleges, as well as a private practice where I provide some consulting and educational/mental health support to organizations, school divisions, really anybody interested in the topic of humans being at the heart of what we do. And other than that, I hang out with my family and love reading and research. That's a passion.
All right. Well, wonderful. So here at Elevated Life Academy, we love to hear about journeys and how you have gotten to a point where you're living an elevated life. And I particularly want to know more about this human curriculum because I was reading through it about, you know, getting back to our values, like how important our values are. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting how you start with, living an elevated life. And
Mhm.
when I hear that terminology, I think that a listener might be thinking that I live a perfect life, an enlightened life, a
Mhm.
life where I'm always living in my values and being successful. And I just would like to start out by saying, the human condition is one of suffering and struggle, and the
Mhm.
human curriculum was a framework that I came up with to support, guiding myself through a
Mhm.
process of teaching initially. I found the profession of teaching very difficult. I was trained to teach subjects, and of course, inherent in that is
Mhm.
teaching students, but I wasn't really trained in the art and science of the nuanced human condition of the individual
Mhm.
that was going to show up in my classroom with big behaviors, big needs, big life experiences. And so over the last 25, 30 years, I've built this framework that I call the human curriculum that has supported my own journey as a human, thinking about my past, my present, and my future potential, and then inherently guided me through the process of teaching and supporting others. So at its heart, it acknowledges that we're all unique. We're all in a process of struggling, suffering, thriving, surviving,
Mhm.
and,
Mhm.
bouncing back and forth in that via life. And so it's really a framework and a guide that has a philosophical foundation, a process at the root, and capacity building to support, thriving and surviving in life.
Mhm. Can you get more specific about building the capacity? Like what are some specifics?
Yeah, so a foundational principle of the human curriculum to start off with is
Mhm.
this notion of self-care to care give. So I
Yep.
realized really early on in my career as an educator, aka leader in a classroom, that if I didn't take care of myself, then everyone was going to suffer. So it's
Mhm.
that notion of self-care to collective or community care just as a foundation. So, based on that foundation, I have a process that you work through in the human curriculum, and that is Aware, Care, Cope, ACC. And that process asks you to think about in terms of awareness. How am I building awareness of my needs, the needs of others? That's a knowledge gathering sort of thinking cognitive domain of the curriculum. Moving to care, how am I slowly integrating new knowledge into my everyday experiences to support thriving and flourishing? So that in itself is an attitude or an affect that I build. And then coping. So what skills am I practicing and using daily to build strength and resilience and cope with adversity? Keeping in mind, going back to what I said a moment ago, life is full of adversity. And so the aware care cope process eventually leads to what I call cope, manage, grow, heal, repeat. And the key part of that is repeat, because we never actually arrive at this place where we are enlightened or we are necessarily elevated. That might be a momentary place that we feel some strength and some success, and then life blows our way, and inevitably we have to start the process again. So those are some foundational principles and processes that guide the curriculum. And then it has content areas. So if you want me to talk about those, I can dive in. But
yeah, I would love to hear more. Keep
Sure.
going. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the content of the curriculum is framed around 5 M's and 5 R's. That is an evolving process that started with my master's and PhD dissertation and my postdoc experiences as an academic. So essentially, the entire curriculum has been built on, life experience, practice, research, from research back to practice, and this loop, that has built these things. And so it's a living curriculum built around these sort of 10 foundational pillars. So the first is that meaning and mindset are necessary for thrival and survival. So figuring out who we are, why we're here, what we believe in and value. You talked about that at the start. So we dig into that through meaning and mindset components. The next is honoring that mental health is a capacity that we need to build, and it is a part of the human condition. We all have mental health. We vacillate between being ill and well throughout our lifetime. And how do we build literacy and capacity to support our well-being in that sense? From there, we move to mentorship and management. And what those two M's stand for is thinking about ourselves as building capacity as mentors, a teachable person as a mentee in life, and how we sort of float between those roles and how important they are for the human condition and our development throughout a lifetime. And then management in terms of self-management, self-regulation, building self-compassion, self-awareness. There's a lot of components there. And then to how, as a leader, if I am a leader, whether that's an educator or in another discipline or domain, how I cultivate and support managing the humans that I work with, keeping them in mind at the heart of what I do. So then that is the kind of content or thematic areas of the curriculum, which work to build capacity in the 5 R areas, which I won't dive into too deeply, but I'll just say what they are. And so first, relationship, because as we know in the human work, if we work in the capacity of human development, relationships at the root. So relationship, building resilience, developing and accessing resources, working on routines for well-being and safety and support of others, and then reflective practice, which kind of closes the loop and brings us back to the start. And so that's a big part of it, is that reflective component, which is built in throughout.
So is this like a class that folks take, or several classes or different levels?
Yeah, it's become a lot of things. And so I started teaching or using the human curriculum as I was building it in my teaching in K to 12 education. So I spent 20 years teaching K to 12. And as I was working through this process, I was bringing it into my classrooms and using it to support how I supported my students, which at that time was mostly middle years. I've spent most of my career teaching that 11, 12 to 16, 17 age range. And then it became a foundational component of the classes that I taught at the University of Saskatchewan in the College of Education. And that led to whole courses that were rooted in this. So I was given the opportunity to build courses around the human curriculum. So I teach health courses, mental health courses, trauma responsive courses for educators and the lawyers. And we look at how to use the human curriculum as a guide to support, as I said, our well-being, but then bringing that to the collective well-being, because as lawyers and teachers, I see us in caregiving professions. Humans are at the heart of our work. And so it is courses at the undergraduate level as well as at the graduate level. So I teach graduate courses rooted in the human curriculum, and we take a couple of different focus areas. So we go in the direction of research in terms of educational research courses, or curriculum, thinking about the human curriculum as pedagogy. So the methods and practices of how we do things, that would be a curriculum focus. I also offer the human curriculum to the community. So I have organizations, government organizations, school divisions, legal organizations, community entities that will call upon me, and in some capacity I'll deliver the human curriculum, whether it's in a one-shot 3-hour kind of workshop, or whether it's over the course of several days for that organization. And with the Aware Care Cope being the process, I just decide, depending on the time that we have to go through the content, whether or not that is kind of delivered in a here's the lay of the land and what you can do with this information, to an actual longer term process. So in a whole term course, for example, where we would gather for 3 hours a week over 12 weeks, the human curriculum would go deep into the process of Aware Care Cope, where I would be doing a deep dive into myself and thinking about what I can bring from learning about me to my profession.
Wow. Pretty comprehensive. And interestingly, I just think about you're basically helping people that may have never gotten this education have an opportunity, like, here are some different ways that you can find meaning and purpose in your life. And you're not saying this, but this is kind of how my brain's understanding it, is helping them be more aligned, grow their capacity to be more grounded and live a healthy life. Like all these skills that normally we get with our caregivers growing up, but not all of us had that potential opportunity to get those things.
Exactly.
So it's like, don't panic. You have a class that you can take that can really personal growth, help you expand. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I teach the courses, I focus on myself. I mean, as a therapist, educator, parent, leader, I have to be careful about what I share and still have boundaries, right? I have to acknowledge that my life experiences involve the experiences of others, and I just have to be very careful about what I share and how I share it. But I do acknowledge that my life history has trauma, and it also has privilege. I'm white, middle class, settler Canadian, and living and working in systems that include families that have intergenerational trauma, either at the root or surrounding us. And I do talk about how that evolved into mental health issues and concerns for myself. Anxiety is a big thing that I carry around with me. Um, and so I share, my life experiences in terms of those kind of being the questions and queries I had that I wondered about, that became foundations for the human curriculum, and that I didn't have that guide. And so the human curriculum is, like I said, that container or that framework. And I also remind people it's not a prescriptive process. It doesn't come with the how to, in the sense of here are all the things you need to do. It's a guide that says, who are you? How do you find yourself within these content areas? And what can you figure out that can support you on your journey, right? So it's not something I come in and prescribe to people. I say, here's a container, and you can put in it whatever you need. And we can follow sort of these pillars that support our learning throughout. And through that, especially in the courses that I teach, we delve deep into conversation and connection and building community through that content. And in essence, just building us up and supporting ourselves from the inside out.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm hearing, is that helping everyone go in to their own inner wisdom and letting the answers arise from there.
Yeah. Yeah, so we all belong within the human curriculum, right? Anyone can teach it, anyone can learn from it, and you can take it in a direction that you want. If you come from a particular culture or place or spiritual background or, psychoeducational background, you can take what helps you thrive and find where it fits in the container. And in that sense, the human curriculum as a graduate course, for example, for master's or PhD students,
Mhm.
has an element of heuristic self-study that kind of trickles all the way through the human curriculum. So it is a curriculum that helps you turn inside and look
Mhm.
at what the gaps are, what your needs are, and how to support those first.
Mhm.
So that kind of came from, my early teaching and learning experiences as I was kind of bridging the gap between a student and a pre-service teacher in the late 90s. I was coming into classrooms and we were learning about buzzwords like trauma-informed teaching. And
Mhm.
as I started to move into my professional practice, I felt like that was kind of the end goal, but that's certainly not where we start. Like trauma-informed or trauma-responsive leadership and teaching comes from starting with the self first. This isn't about others who need us to help them find the pathway. We need to help ourselves, and then
Mhm.
from that personal experience of ebbing and flowing, sorry, through
Mhm.
life's adversity, we can then shine a light in a direction to be trauma responsive because we've done the inner work. So that's
Yeah, I love that because it's one of the things because I teach as well and I
okay.
teach a lot of therapists. And so I'm always encouraging, self-work because if we don't do the work, we can't be aligned with, because we're struggling ourselves.
Yeah,
So absolutely building the capacity to hold that attuned space, for our clients, for our students or friends even, or family,
yeah, yeah.
even. Yeah.
Yeah, and being a trained therapist myself as well, like we all know, given our registering bodies, whoever that may be, we have to have that component where we've done hours for self-care or certain hours for personal therapy. And sometimes we think about it, and I've been in that space too early in my career where I think of it as a box I need to check or an add-on to what I
Right.
do in my real work. And coming full circle over the last 20 or 30 years, I realized that like self-care piece that a lot of us say, self-care, self-schmare, or it's been monetized, or it's been,
Yeah.
so often talked about on social media that it's kind of become something that, is irrelevant, I guess, or
Mhm.
simplistic or simplified. It really is at the heart of everything we do, and it has to come first. So,
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
yeah, that's kind of been a driver or motivation behind that because it wasn't until I actually started applying self-care principles to my life, which also include forgiveness, room for mistakes, facing
Mhm.
my desire for perfectionism, all
Mhm.
kinds of things that include
Mhm.
self-compassion and self-empathy and struggling through the suck, essentially,
Mhm.
and just
Mhm.
facing those things and not setting them aside when I go to work, bringing them with me to some capacity
Mhm.
as I support others and help them, try to help them.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically being a human. It makes sense that this is human curriculum, right? Because
Yep,
it's like, okay, this is what it means to be a human. Exactly,
yep,
what you're saying.
yep,
So, if whatever you're comfortable sharing, how did how did your personal journey? I always like to have a personal journey question here on the podcast because
yep,
so many, I did title it Elevated Life Academy because yes, we do suffer as human beings, we do struggle, and I wanted to help people know that hey, if you build your capacity like you're talking, if you build your capacity for things, you can live more peacefully, you can feel free, you can flourish, and that's where the elevated life, came from. And it's a process of getting there, right? And so everyone that I interview is like, what are the skills or tools or how did you get there? So it's like that's your own personal story. So I'm just wondering, where did you begin? It sounds like this came in to really support you to get there. Could you share a little bit of your own personal story, whatever you're comfortable sharing?
Sure. Yeah, and I'll just tie into what you're saying right now with this elevated experience, which I'm sure has roots in Buddhist traditions and philosophies. And there's a great
Mhm.
quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. I can't remember the exact quote, but it's kind of like, if you want peace from the world or in the world, you have to start with peace within.
Fine. Yeah.
That's how I see that elevated experience starts with the self. How do I elevate myself to a new level of self-power and self-compassion to support that in the world? So yeah, my life journey, looking back, like loosely speaking, if I think about, I don't know if your audience is familiar with the ACEs, but a study
Mhm.
from the 90s
More
where
than likely, yeah.
yeah, it looked at trauma amongst different groups. And I mean, it has its complicated factors. It's not the be all to end all as far as studies, but it does give us a breakdown of kind of 10 areas of trauma, abuse, neglect factors in families that we can grow up with. And if people want to, they can kind of give themselves a score. And I did that early on in my life and realized that, I had 6 out of 10 ACEs. And I don't get into what those are when I teach necessarily, but that life experience and trauma kind of led me to feeling lost as a teenager. I didn't have purpose or direction. I dropped out of high school because I didn't see the point. I didn't fit within the system, and I kind of floundered for a while, probably not even querying what was going on, just going through the
Mhm.
motions of life. And eventually I became a parent as a teenager. I was 18 when my first child was born. And that threw me into a place where I needed to focus on something above myself. I could
Mhm.
no longer just be focused on just living life. I had a higher calling as a
Mhm.
mother. And what was I going to do with that so that my
Mhm.
child didn't my child wasn't born into a world where they potentially didn't have meaning and purpose. And so I started
Mhm.
seeking direction, and that led me to teaching. I thought, well, I can finish school, I can become a teacher, I'll learn about psychology and the human condition, how to
Mhm.
support young people, which I didn't feel I had when I was young. My
Mhm.
parents did their best, and I love them for that. And we're all just doing our best, and
Mhm.
those experiences come with the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so I wanted to learn about that and how to support other young people. I thought teaching was the most direct path to that. So I finished high school as a young mom and went off to university, and for better or for worse, came out and worked in the school system. And I worked in I was drawn to schools where there was a lot of adversity. So in Saskatoon, we have what are called inner city community schools. At the time, that would have
Mhm.
been, I don't know if we still designate our schools that way, but provincially, they designate our schools in communities with high socioeconomic need or high
Mhm.
impact of colonization, high cultural diversity,
Mhm.
or poverty density environments as inner city community schools. I spent most of my career, if not kind of all of my career, in those schools, really drawn to supporting what I at the time termed youth at risk, because I saw
Yeah.
myself as a youth at risk, and
Mhm.
wanting to bring to those students what I didn't have in school, which was an interest in life and learning.
Right, right.
Yeah. And so that I felt was my calling. And to go back where we started the conversation, within the first few years of teaching, I realized, well, I was taught to teach these students content, but not teach these students in terms of the heart of who they are.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of dove me into myself, my own therapeutic practice, and trying to bring what I was learning to my own life and do my own reflective work. And that was then just an ebb and flow of teaching and life experience and reflection that
Mhm.
led to an interest in research and further learning.
Mhm. And so, when did the therapist part of you come into play here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd always thought about As I was teaching, I always thought, I worked closely with school therapists, social workers,
Mhm.
psychologists, and tried to listen intently to what they were telling me about what I needed to do in the classroom. And I felt like, and I didn't know a lot about therapy at the time, but I felt like what I needed to do was therapy in the classroom. And well, how do I do that? You run up against
Mhm.
questions like, I'm trained to be a teacher, not a therapist. What's the
Mhm.
line? Where's the boundary? And I started taking courses and certificates and different things to help me learn a little bit about the world of therapy. And through that and completing a master's in therapeutic counseling, eventually, I found myself working in a mental health day program as the teacher, but also with the therapeutic background. And we were working with students in that program who came to us because they were struggling in the regular school system. They were
Mhm.
quote unquote youth at risk, and we were providing a therapeutic school day for them. And so I started, because I was the teacher in that program who also then had a little bit of a therapeutic background. Um, Trying to bridge those two worlds. And I finally
Mhm.
settled on, for me, the answer was therapeutic teaching. So I'm not a therapist in the classroom, I'm a teacher, but I can do this job therapeutically. There are
Mhm.
components of, attachment therapy, cognitive
Right.
behavioral therapy,
Mhm.
dialectic behavior therapy. There are components of
Mhm.
all kinds of therapeutic modalities that can fit within the classroom that I can
Mhm.
learn about and teach with those concepts at the root of what I do and help support my students in their learning journey. So I'm not doing therapy in the classroom. I'm teaching through a therapeutic lens in a
Mhm.
therapeutic way. And that also was growing and changing with my study and interest in a human curriculum. And so, a big
Mhm.
part of the human curriculum when I teach it in an educational context is learning about the art and science of therapeutic teaching.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, unfortunately, I think more and more teachers are having to have therapeutic skills because of the students, and where things are at. And I'm listening to you and I just think about there's a difference between, we used to say trauma informed, and I really liked what you said about trauma response. Because what I've seen over and over again is the knowledge is there, but the behavior is not aligned with a trauma response that's appropriate to what's going on. So I'm hearing you talk about that in bringing that into the classroom, which then connects to your human curriculum.
Yeah.
Like of course, like all these social skills and attunement and presence and relationship, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about. I hear that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really it's really wonderful. And now you've just taken it from the elementary, middle school years, up through high school, undergraduate, and also graduate. So you've been able to use it in many, many different places.
Yep. Yeah, the 5 themes kind of that came out, the 5 M's and the 5 R's were really, collated or they culminated through my dissertation work. I,
Mhm.
went from thinking about my own life experience as, again, what I called a youth at risk. I wouldn't use that terminology today, but in the past, that's
Mhm.
what I termed my
Mhm.
life experience as, to a master's program where I wanted to look at youth at risk. And I interviewed youth who were in high needs, specialized programs, at risk of dropping out of school or at
Mhm.
risk in life, trying to find out, what might be at the root of your journey or your needs that I can turn into pedagogical practice as a
Mhm.
teacher to
Mhm.
support you. And then I wanted to, in my dissertation, initially look at teachers at risk. So, teachers at risk of burnout or who were
Mhm.
struggling in the profession. And then I realized, I've looked enough at risk here. Maybe I want to look at the opposite of that, which might
Mhm.
be thriving in the profession.
Yes.
What are
Yes.
people who are thriving doing
Mhm.
that we can learn from? Yeah. And that really led to a lot of the rest of my research and practice because
Mhm.
I worked with some teachers who felt they were thriving. Um, and I developed those themes, and that's where I kind of landed on. I started vetting those themes through the people that I taught. Like, do they make sense? Does it fit with your worldview? How would you reshape these themes? And just sort of over time realized that those 10 themes together can be integrated into any area of work or life practice. You can take it in any direction you want to go. And further research that I did that really helped with that was we looked at teachers who were thriving during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we called them pandemic thrivers, and we wanted to hear from people who, we heard a lot in the news and a lot around the world, quite naturally, about those struggling during the pandemic. It was a hard and difficult time. I was teaching at the post-secondary level during that time, and shifting to online and supporting students' mental health was very, very difficult. But I wondered who were the pandemic thrivers? First, were there any, and what were they doing? And from that study, it really took those M&R areas deeper and broader, because I saw that in what they were doing. They had
Mindset, meaning,
yeah, they had those skills and capacities, and that's how they thrived. They did it in different ways. Some leaned on spirituality and faith, others leaned on cultural or ancestral knowledge, others leaned on community. There were different ways that those 5M and 5R capacities or content areas evolved or supported them in their practice, but it all kind of still came down to that. So I still use that as the foundation or the thematic areas for learning and development in my courses.
Yeah, that's really cool. Been a trauma therapist for 20 years. The last 5 years, I totally have shifted over to post-traumatic growth, thriving and flourishing. Because it's
Yes.
like you can excavate that stuff for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
How about what does it look like to like live now and thrive and flourish? So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
really
and that's a
exciting.
big part of the curriculum is talking about that trauma lens. And we all know about PTSD, post-traumatic
Mhm.
growth, or sorry, post-traumatic stress disorder,
Mhm.
but we don't learn about post-traumatic wisdom or post-traumatic
Mhm.
growth. And that really
Mhm.
does tie back to my life experience, because I thought the only way for me to roll out of my childhood was with PTSD. But that's
Mhm.
not true. There was a part
Mhm.
of me striving to learn and analyze and
Mhm.
reflect on my experience. What was that part? I didn't have a name for it. And it's so wonderful that people like you and people in the trauma world are investigating those different pathways, because going
Mhm.
back to aware, care, cope, sometimes it's just the awareness that there's a different way to roll out of this experience than having
Mhm.
a stress disorder. So
Mhm.
I that really speaks to my heart, that component.
Yes. Yeah, it speaks to mine too because I think a lot of folks I have a high ACE score as well.
Yeah.
A lot of folks, look at that and it's like, "Oh, my life is over, like, I'm gonna get disease, I'm gonna die early." Like, they start to go down that path,
Yeah.
and so speaking to no, there are these you have parts of you that if encouraged, if exposed to these different capacities that you can grow. That's the whole thing
Yeah.
about everything that you're talking about and why we have elevated life is to show people there's so much that you can do so that you can live the life that you really want instead of what just because of what happened to you that doesn't mean that that is your identity for the rest of your life. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
And what you're speaking to at the heart of that, I think, is healing. Like when I hear
Yes.
elevated practice again, I think at the root of an elevated practice is that healing centered focus. And
Mhm.
from my experience, I wouldn't say this, is a statistic or a research based opinion, but from my experience, those in helping professions find themselves to those professions because they had harm in their life, and they wished or hoped or needed some form of help or healing that just wasn't there. And many of us find ourselves, like I said, in a helping profession, but potentially haven't done the work to get us prepared to work in a profession where we're going to be triggered by other people's trauma constantly.
Mhm. Mhm.
And, then how do we support people without setting our own need for healing
Mhm.
aside? And
Mhm.
so that's like that cope, manage, grow, heal a little part of
Mhm.
me, right? And then repeat the process and continue to use that
Mhm.
learning in my
Mhm.
professional practice so that I can show up as, the best practitioner that I can to be there
Sure.
for those I've signed up to help.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. So is there anything that maybe you would want to share that I haven't asked you that would be important to share with our listeners? Just double checking.
Yeah, gosh, I don't know. We've talked about a lot
Did
in
we
the
cover it all?
yeah, I think kind of my bottom line message is that humans help humans heal. And
Mhm.
so if we find ourselves in a helping profession, going back to that human, who are you? What is the
Mhm.
work that you've done to support yourself and strengthen yourself and build that capacity because you will be called upon, you are called upon in your practice to support
Mhm.
others' healing and growth. And I think that is both a responsibility and something that we can honor as having immense power to support the human condition. And I'm going to be stronger the more I work on myself. And going
Mhm.
back to where we started, it's a journey. I'm not there yet as the
No.
perfect practitioner in air quotes.
Right.
I'm on a learning journey and I make mistakes at home and I have challenges in my personal and professional life. I'm just always aware and paying attention to what I can learn from that and how I can use that in my own capacity to help myself heal and then potentially others if I'm called upon to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just call that the journey of life,
Yeah.
really. And this is going to be, I used to think that I'd arrive. This is when
Right.
I was younger. I'd
Yeah.
arrive at this certain point, but now I'm realizing this is a path. This is a path
Yes.
for the rest of my life. So
Yeah.
I've let go of that. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming and sharing all your wisdom and your human curriculum. I'm very fascinated by that. And we'll make
Yes.
sure that we have all your socials so that
Sure.
people can reach out to you that find this, fascinating or have questions for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can give a little plug if people are interested in the topic, I talk about it mostly. I give away most of my free knowledge on Instagram at Dr. Judy Jaunzems-Fernuk. So that's a great place to connect with me and hear some of these personal stories interwoven with my teaching and life experience. And then I also, in the spirit of reflective practice, have a human curriculum journal available on Amazon. So if anyone's interested
Awesome.
in that, they can check that out. And it has all elements of the curriculum woven throughout to help you walk a learning journey for, whatever period of time you're interested in doing that.
Well, beautiful. Thank you for so much for giving that to the world and being who you are, and because we all need to shine our light for everything that's going on in this world to help
That's tough.
people.
Yeah, it's a tough space. So I also appreciate what you're doing in getting people's voices out there and collecting thoughts around how to elevate our practice and move to that
Mhm.
next level in personal and professional care.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
Thanks. So I hope everyone enjoyed hearing about the human curriculum. Sounds like a very comprehensive curriculum for all of us to learn different skills, different capacities, how to take care of ourselves so that we have the capacity to have the space to take care of another. So often I think we um there's a lot of patterns out there where we take care of others at the expense of ourselves. And so this sounds a little bit more balanced. There's lots of reflection. These are skills and tools that could really help people maybe live in a little bit more harmony, a little bit more balanced, and make sure that you're taking care of yourself until you expand and offer services to take care of another. Just as I have said before, if you're finding this podcast helpful, please share it with folks. We are trying to share all over the world different ways, different skills, different tools, so that we can rebuild the world in a more positive direction. And if you want to be part of that, we would love to have you. We're trying to grow a big conscious community out there. So share with whoever you think would benefit. And thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it. And until we meet again, thanks so much.